Hello everyone, it's Lennon. Today I want to talk about something quite special to me, but I don't really know what it means, what it could mean, what it says about me. And that's the concept of the evil monk archetype. Now, what led me here is a series of obsessions, research obsessions, literary obsessions, things that have always interested me, especially in like my adult life, things that have interested me in serious ways. And it's kind of led to a place of exploration into like wondering why these things interest me. And it kind of led me to the archetype of the monk, but then specifically the concept of the evil monk. And I'm using evil loosely here because what I mean by evil monk, it isn't necessarily evil. It's monks that have done heinous acts, monks in literature that have done cruel, manipulative things, and why that concept makes them evil, but then also why I'm drawn to it. And it got me kind of into a place of exploring human nature and how I've always believed that monks are in and of themselves, and I'm talking specifically Catholic monks here, like, I guess stereotypical, we could go into like medieval times, the Middle Ages, monks from the Middle Ages in deep Catholicism. They've always interested me, and they're the monks that I'm thinking about in terms of this archetype. And so we can go a little into, I was going to go into a little bit of what my obsessions or my likes, my interests are in these terms, and then how it kind of led me to this exploration. Now, I've always been interested in Gregorian chants or Latin litanies, Latin chants specifically. I've been an adult, I've gravitated towards the instrumental side of music for studying, for research, for relaxation. I used to be one of those teenagers that would ask for like hydrotherapy, Celtic flutes, nature sounds with violins and pianos and cellos. I used to be one of those teenagers that bought CDs like that. On top of my very extensive musical, like that little binder that you have CDs in, I had an extensive collection of music anyway. But in terms of like what I would always go back to were instrumental. I found that I love violins and cellos. That's where my heart lies. That's where my soul lives, is in cello music, sad, emotive cellos. But then it kind of led me into a love of Gregorian chants. Of course, you know, when you explore things, it leads you to other places in terms of anything, but music specifically. And now that we have internet and YouTube, your explore page tends to look like what you've already searched for. So in early adult life, I realized that I had a love for chanting, for Latin chants, for Gregorian chants, for psalms in a Latin sense. And then it since I've been thinking about this the last couple of days, it's led me to think about other things that could be considered religious or specifically Catholic in nature. I've always been obsessed with the candle altars in Catholic churches, where the prayer candles, where you go and light a prayer for a loved one. The ritualistic setting for Catholics to be Christian, and I was brought up Christian. I was brought up a Southern Baptist Christian, which is a totally different set of shit. But getting out of that, I realized that I probably would have really benefited from more of a ritual in my religion than I had, because there weren't really rituals in the brand of Christianity that I grew up in. I mean, there were traditions, and like hymns and songs, but nothing ritualistic in nature, nothing to really like pull that witchy ritual side out of me. I probably would have really benefited going to Mass, lighting candles, reading novenas, things like that. I probably would have benefited from that as an adolescent, but anyway, I digress. So I was always drawn to religious ritual and candles and prayer in that very religious connotation, and then chants, like not just hymns, but I mean Latin chants. I don't even know what they're saying half the time, but I don't care. So chanting, manuscripts, old books. And I don't mean just any books. I mean like the Gutenberg Bible. I do in my thrift stores, when I come across one of those thick, squishy white Bibles that are like this big, I love thumbing through them. I love the concept of the Bible, the Bibles back in the day that had red for like Jesus speaking. Not all Bibles do that, but some Bibles, some older Bibles, some King James Version Bibles that you come across have where some text is red and some is black. I've always been fascinated by that. And I have done that in my own grimoires and my own Book of Shadows, where some of the text is a color that resonates with the intention I'm putting on that page. And it does have a very aesthetically pleasing thing about it to me. So, but all of this combined, all of these little things. Oh, and then also the 7 deadly sins, it's just all these things, when you combine them, there's a Catholic overtone. Now, I have no ties to Catholicism, no family or friends that I know that are Catholic that could have pulled me into that world. I just did it very organically, like researched it myself. And I realized, I started to, realize that this had a Catholic umbrella. All of these things tended to have a Catholic umbrella. Why am I drawn to Catholicism? And it's not so much that I'm drawn to Christianity as the upper umbrella, but what am I drawn to in Catholicism specifically? And it started me down, watching documentaries of monk life. I watched a great one about a year ago called Into the Great Silence or something like that. It was a 2-hour documentary of Capuchin monks that live a ascetic life where, there's manual labor and it's ritual and it's prayer, but there's no talking, none. And there was no dialogue. The director of this documentary wanted to pull out the profound impact of these monks not talking at all. No words are spoken. And so he follows them around their day-to-day life, but then he doesn't put any dialogue. All you get is like them walking, sounds of the candles burning, sounds of the rain falling, leaves crunching, stuff like that. You just get the sounds that the monks would have. And oh my gosh, it was like such a cathartic experience. Now, some people may not be able to watch a 2-hour documentary with no dialogue, no talking, no narration of any kind, but there was something about it that soothed me. And so it's these things that have combined into trying to get me to tunnel as to what this could mean. Why am I drawn to this? And I started to really meditate on the concept of monkhood and nunhood, and how, as an outsider and someone that leads an outsider life, I call someone like me living an outsider life because I kind of feel like monks, and from now on, I'm just going to refer to them as monks, not priests or nuns, but it's all kind of, conglomeration. Monks lead such simple, what I would consider simple, restrictive, censored lives. To me, that seems to drag against the soul, to drag against the aspects of human nature in a way that seems redundant, that seems like it's not natural, like it would go against the grains of nature to restrict oneself like that. And how human nature molds us over the course of a lifetime, it's just been fascinating to research and to think about it in my own psyche. But then I realized, probably for these monks, it's not a restrictive, simple life. This is their calling. I think that monks are the epitome of what you do is who you are. Like if I have a job as a secretary, that's not who I am, right? But for monks, it definitely is. It's a vocation. It's something that calls to them on a cellular soul level, that they wouldn't consider it a simple, restrictive life because they don't know any different. And they just know that they have such a reverence for God that they have to live this life. And that means something to them to go onto their soul path. And then even further down that road, I realized that my heart lies in the soul of the tormented monk, the evil monk, the one that grapples with the human condition, and that sometimes the human condition wins out in terms of manipulation and abuse, and how you want so much for them to lead this soul-driven life that they thought that they wanted, but then temptation overcomes them and they can't not commit these heinous acts. And it's this torture, what I'm calling tormented desire. Trademark, tormented desire. This concept of leading this, chaste, pure, solitude, a life of solitude, censure, silence, restriction, I'll say, just a restrictive life. And I mean restrictive, not in their terms, but in an outsider's terms. A monk tends to live a life that is so far removed from the human growth cycle. They wouldn't have been faced with challenges that would allow them to come up with their own. Like if you think about a development of a human, through childhood and adolescence, you grow into yourself, things happen, you're faced with challenges that oftentimes have an effect on you that allow you to make up your mind in terms of your values and morals, and that maps out how you're going to be as an adult. It's just, in terms of the human experience, I believe that that's something psychologically that would have to happen. That's something in growth, that in development, that would have to happen in order for you to actually make up your mind and to know what's true and what's false and what you believe in, what lies in the gray areas, But for monks, they go into seminary school so young. And seminary school is just like regular school. It's restrictive, so there's only, for monks, there's only boys. There's no girls at all. And they start young. They grow up in the church, so it's mostly school plus church. And, they learn all about the church life plus some academics. And then when they get out of seminary school, they get assigned a monastery and go and work at the monastery and then take their vows and are with the brotherhood that they're assigned to their life through. And that's, I guess, a simplified version of what a monk's life would look like. That's so different than how an outsider child would have grown up. And I think that for some of the monks that lead these life of torment, of torment in a way that when they are finally faced with a challenge, a beautiful person that they are really sexually, intensely lustful and attracted to, or about with ambition, where they can see that they could potentially be the Supreme Father, or the Holy Father in that monastery, or they can see popehood in their future or something. Ambition takes over, and if you look and the underlying issues, some of the monks that have committed heinous acts over the centuries have had times where they've been directly faced with one of the 7 deadly sins, and it has overtaken them in a way that they can't fight the tormented desire. And I find that fascinating. And why, though, like if I were faced with the same kinds of temptation, why I believe would I have an easier time of it? Do I think that? Do I think that if I'm faced with a beautiful person that I'm intensely lustful and attracted to in that way, would I be able to overcome temptation in that manner? You know, would I, if I'm faced with ambition at work and I want to climb the, you know, CEO ladder, the corporate ladder, or any of, you know, these issues that deal with pride and lust and vanity and jealousy, you know, you get into these issues. Is it because they're monks that I'm drawn to this? That you think, as an outsider, me, I think, well, they wouldn't have jealousy because they all dress the same and they have to cut all their hair off. So it's not that vanity rules any part of their life. So that's out. Pride. The only thing in the church that they could potentially ever aspire to is father or mother superior, right? And that's usually such an honor in those monasteries and nunneries that it's like one of those honors that's bestowed on you like a Purple Heart or like the Nobel Peace Prize. It's like you're so overcome with emotion that you've even been picked by popular demand that you take it out of reverence for your sister or brotherhood. You know, something like that. It's like such an honor. It's higher above even your ambition because there's a love and reverence there. But still. So you think as an or I do, okay? I think as an outsider, well, they wouldn't really be faced with this, right? But sometimes they are. And then, of course, lust, you know, like nuns rarely would come in contact with men in a sexual way, like dressed in a way that would indicate something like that. Or I don't necessarily, I never would have believed that there would have been flirting involved between men and nuns or monks and, you know, or spiritual people, spiritual leaders, spiritual led lives with outsider lives, you know, like the melding doesn't really happen, you know, all the time. So I wouldn't think that these people would be faced with these certain temptations, but maybe they are, maybe they have, maybe their love of God is greater than that of the temptation that like someone like I would face. And it's just so fascinating to think, why do I put these individuals, these concepts on a pedestal above my own human nature, right? Is it a way that makes me think of my own tormented desire in a harsher way? Am I being harsh on the fact that I don't lead a censured, restrictive life? Then I thought about times where I have. Times in my own spiritual life that I have restricted myself. I've gone without. I've fasted in terms of food. I've fasted in terms of sex. I've actually gone days without speaking one word out loud. I think I went 3 days. And that's because I have children, so it was really hard. But I did. And so there are bouts of solitude and silence and fasting and restrictions that outsiders like myself that don't leave restrictive religious lives can go through and it be beneficial. But there's something about the fact that monks lead these lives all the time. It's all the time kind of a deal. Not talking for 30 plus years would be incredibly restrictive on the human condition. And it got me thinking, I'm not necessarily putting these people on pedestals. It's more about the fact that I think it's more about learning about the human condition and whether I think that, does that go against the grains of nature? Does that go against the soul? You're leading a life that you believe comes from your soul, and it is who you are. But not talking for 30 years is such a heavy restriction. Is it unnatural? Is there something unnatural about it? Is there something that when they're alone, right, like me, I'd be like Maria from Sound of Music. If I'm by myself, I'm singing and I'm talking and I'm waving my hands, and I'm like, and then I'm like when Mother Superior walks by, I'm like, bless you. Or, you don't even say anything. I couldn't even go through that. I couldn't even get through that. I had to say bless you. Or God bless you, I can't not talk. So as from an outsider perspective like mine, it's fascinating to think about, is it natural? Actually, psychologically, physiologically, is it possible to go through a life of 30 years, I'll say 30 years, not even a life, 30 years of solitude, of silence, and I mean silence, of not experiencing things. Now, I don't mean to say that these monks have these thoughts, that they're not experiencing things. But in my outsider view, I think these people aren't experiencing human life, right? A life that, in terms of the human condition, they lead this human life. It seems so far removed from mine, an outsider life, that, is it natural? Does it go against the grains of human condition to lead these restrictive, censured lives? Or do they not even think about it? I think about all the things that I'm obsessed with: Gregorian chants, candles, and I mean candles, okay? The act of lighting a candle, putting on Hildegard of Bingen, and listening to the angels sing, because she wrote in angelic voices. She composed chants for the feminine vocals, so she calls it feminine vocals of the female. Vocals, because the vocals of the monks were, when they sang them, it felt different in the vocals, in the vocal cords. So she changed them so that her sisters would be more comfortable singing them, and also so they'd be harder to sing. She wanted it to be kind of laborious. If you try to sing one of her chants, you're gonna be out of breath. She wanted the chants to be beautiful, but also laborious on the body, as a form of manual labor, which is harsh to think about, but actually pretty freaking genius if you think about it. Just, this one more thing, we'll get some manual labor in while we sing, we'll get out of breath. But anyway, I digress. So when you put these things on, when you light a candle, you get into what we all, I guess, in the spiritual community, witchcraft community, think of a ritualistic mindset. It doesn't happen all the time, though. You don't stay in that mindset all the time. You couldn't, because we lead an outsider life with jobs and kids and spouses and partners and, other family. But if you lived in a brotherhood, or a sisterhood, you wouldn't have any of that. And it just feels so heavy, but then also way outside of human life. Sometimes I think it drags against the soul in a powerful way. But when I think about all the little things that I've loved that have led me to this archetype of the evil or the tormented monk, does it go against the grains of nature? And, you know, I think about The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I think about several novels that I have books, reference materials that I have right here to show you. But I also think about The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Frollo was so tormented. He prided himself on leading this life, right? Of leading this deacon life. And he believed to his soul that Esmeralda was a test, that lusting her was a test, right? And I know it's Disney, but there's a rendition of Hellfire, the song that Frollo sings, that's in the Disney version of Hunchback by Jonathan Young. I'm going to leave it below. If you are interested, listen to it. There's such a power in the way that Jonathan portrays the torment of going against his own nature, but then also going against human nature, because lust is normal. It's a normal thing to happen, but not for monks. And it's a mind screw, you know? When you think about Frollo, it's kind of like thinking about Herbert from, is it Humphrey? I don't know. Lolita, right? It's kind of about thinking about him from Lolita and how tormented he is and how messed up he is, and or psychologically distressed these people are, these tormented souls. And how if we really got to the essence of these stories, we'd find out a lot about human nature. And that's where my love has gone with all of this. But Frollo, he speaks so... That song is like the epitome of tormented desire. So I'm going to leave the rendition of Hellfire down below by Jonathan Young. Please go listen to it. It is so powerful. So some reference materials that I have that have led me to figure out that I've pretty much been obsessed with the tormented evil monk for a long time. 2 books and a book that I found a couple of years ago. The first is The Italian by Anne Radcliffe. Now, Anne Radcliffe is a Gothic fiction novelist, and this is probably one of her best works in my opinion. It's called The Italian, and on the back of this, it talks about the fact that Shidoni, the monk in this story, is the most evil character, right? But if you really read the synopsis of this book, he's not. Okay? So just listen. The Italian is about this, I'll just say these 2 families, okay? And the the offspring of these families love each other, okay? Get some Romeo and Juliet vibes here. But the mom doesn't approve of the girl. So she conspires with Shidoni, the monk, her spiritual confidant, if you will. She conspires with him to do some evil stuff to the girl, right? But they classify Shidoni as the most evil of characters. Why? It was first the mom that came to the monk, and it was Shidoni that allowed the talk. Sure. But, you know, it's like, why is the monk evil? More evil than the mom who came up with the plan to begin with, you know? Or, you know, I mean, you'd have to read it. But, and it dawned on me. It's because the monk has such a status, right? He is a spiritual leader, spiritual confidant. He's not supposed to allow his flock to have these types of thoughts, right? She should be confessing these thoughts to him in an act of, contrition and an act of absolution, to not think about this anymore, to let this stuff go, to give it to God, right? And he's not doing that. He's allowing her to talk and actually conspiring with her. And the fact that he has such a status, even though it's just spiritual leader versus a flock member, it's in the moment of him allowing it and not telling her that she needs to get back to God, not to give this to God, not to confess this as a sin. The fact that he didn't do that was automatically a betrayal, and it made him more evil than her right off the rip. And this book it does that so great. Because, like, look at the back. It says, Anne Radcliffe skillfully creates an atmosphere of fear and mystery in this exciting narrative, which enters the gloomy and severe world of the sinister monk Schedoni. In the description of the proud, melancholic nature of this austere character, the author transcends the limits of the Gothic paraphernalia and betrays her ambivalent admiration for a complex and fascinating figure of evil. Even though the mom is evil too. But it's not about her. It's about the monk. Okay, you know? So it's just, it's fascinating. Okay? And then the second novel that I've read in my lifetime that, it messed me up. It messed me up, you guys, is The Monk by Matthew Lewis. Now this has some messed up stuff in it. But this goes through the entire life of Ambrosio, who was orphaned on the steps of this monastery, and as he was a boy, he grew up with the monks of the monastery, and then took his vows, and he doesn't leave the monastery. So he's had a very sheltered, not simple, but sheltered life, right? And believed that this was his calling, and had such a relationship with God that was built over the course of a lifetime that made his monkhood almost famous to his flock, that he had such a faith, right? But then some sinister shit happens and he starts losing it, okay? Losing it. In supernatural and mysterious ways, and the forces of evil, the forces of Satan and darkness come and try to take him over, right? This book messed me up. But it was fascinating, and I was on the edge of my seat for most of it, because you want so much for this monk who has led such a sheltered life. You just, I want to like go up and like put my hand on his cheek and be like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You want so much for Ambrosio to stay pure. You want him to be able to defeat the forces of evil and defeat the temptation of the 7 deadly sins. But there's such an inevitability with the way that this is written, like his fate's already written in stone, okay? It's a huge thing in Christianity, right? And then also the underliers of like incest and shit and supernatural shit. It's like they put the supernatural aspects, Matthew Lewis put the supernatural take into this novel to let us know that there is no going against evil, whether you're a monk or not. And you're like, no! It's like that echoing no, and you want Ambrosio to be able to be like, I don't care. Satan can be standing right here, and I would just, be like, piss off. Because his faith is so strong. But it's like one thing blows him over like a feather. And you're like, okay, but I thought your faith was rock solid, So this whole time you're like, you're a monk. This is your calling. What are you doing? Why are you acting like this? But anyways, let me read the back. Let's see. It is a violent tale of ambition, murder, and incest, set in the sinister monastery of the Capuchins in Madrid. The great struggle between maintaining monastic vows and the fulfillment of personal ambition leads its main character, the monk Ambrosio, to temptation and the breaking of his vows, then to sexual obsession and rape, and finally to murder in order to conceal his guilt. The mixture of the supernatural, the horrible, and the carnal make this book as sensational as when it first was published in 1796. This is just like one of those ghost stories that you're reading and you're like the Italian, it hits you harder because there's this connotation of purity. There's this connotation of chastity. And it being monks and monk life and monkhood, you automatically deem this scarier than, another ghost story. Because you're like, because they're so far outside of the outsider life. They have no idea that evil lurks, that evil's behind everything, that everyone's got an agenda, like they don't know the human condition as well as an outsider does. And I'm not saying that makes us better than them. I'm just saying that because they lead these sheltered lives, when they're faced with evil in any kind of a human condition way, selfishness, ambition, greed, right? When they're faced with these things, they don't know how to handle it. And it makes you feel even worse for them than any other main character you've ever come across. Any other antagonist. Protagonist. And you're like, so anyway, this was very controversial when it came out, and it still should be, because it's really rough to get through. But in terms of monks doing heinous things, and there's one last book, and Kellyanne Maddox did a video years ago called Books That Kissed Her Soul, and there's a lot of incredible books on her list. So I'm going to leave that video below for you to go check out. But as someone who's always been fascinated with monastic life and the tortures therein, the tortures of human life and human condition, outsider life, and the cruelties of humanity, right? Of which I have little faith. This book was great. It's called The Dark Box, The Secret History of Confession. Now, this is one of those nonfictions that is just so powerful. Okay, it's got some history in it. It's blown to smithereens of historical facts on the history of the confession booth and what it's done to the Catholic Church over the centuries. And it's so fascinating. It's harsh in some ways, but this has really been teaching me about monks and what a dark box in a dark corner of a church that's for priests and monks that lead these censored, sheltered lives. They are in direct contact with the evils of humanity in these dark corners. This is where the dark box, when it came about, the confessional, when it came about, it became this dark, seedy corner, the underbelly of the church, right? In most respects, it became this entity all on its own that drew these sheltered monks to it, that it led them to take confessions from people leading outsider lives. And they became fascinated by outsiders. They became fascinated by the fact that these people lead such different lives than me. Like, wait, you're lusting after a coworker? Like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that feels like. Tell me more, And I mean, in their own brain, because we're human, okay? These monks are humans. They're not robots. When they hear these things, it fascinates them. And some monks have gone off the deep end. They've manipulated and been cruel and abused some of their flock in order to feel like they lead more intense lives. Maybe it finally dawns on them when they're actually faced with stories of an outsider life, just how simple their lives are. Some monks may not be able to handle that. Now, I don't know if psychologically that's true. I just believe that a life of censure keeps them removed from the human condition. And when they're finally faced with it, when they're faced with just a story, of sex or lust or greed or ambition, it fascinates them as a human, as the curious human. And then temptation, it's like a seed is planted. And then as it grows, the vines of it grow all over the body, and it's almost like involuntary for them to commit heinous acts because they're so fascinated and curious by it. And it overtakes them, right? But if they're removed, if this wasn't a thing, then these monks probably wouldn't have done anything. They probably would have gone the rest of their lives without knowing any of those feelings. But hearing it inside of a confessional box probably allowed the seed to get planted in some of these. Now, that's just my opinion. A lot of these monks that have done these heinous, crazy, manipulative, abusive acts could just be sociopaths. Okay, so there's no way to know. But anyway, fascinating book. I haven't even read it all the way through. It's one of those books that I like to read a chapter and then like think about what I read and meditate on what I read. And it's just like that intense, especially on the harder chapters, you know. But, woo! So anyways, also studying the tarot. The tarot is such a great archetypal thing for me that when I want to dive into an archetype that seems to be fascinating the majority of my adult life, I tend to go to the tarot and do spreads, work with the archetypes of the tarot, specifically the Hierophant. Add the Hierophant and the Devil, right? Add the Hierophant and the Star card, right? In terms of like map out how you think these lives of monks would lead. Think about what in the tarot as a whole they wouldn't experience, right? But then think about what things that you have experienced. Let's say you've never been hit with nostalgia in your life. It's probably damn near impossible, but let's just say that that's the case. Then you would have to take the Six of Cups all the way out of your deck, right? Now, I'm not saying the Six of Cups is just nostalgia, but just for an example. If you think about how different your life versus a monk's life is, it's not talking about pedestals here, we're just talking about the human condition, right? And the human experience. I think that if we're faced with torture in that way, we're faced with tormented desire in that way, there's such a power in learning about the human experience and what it says about you, to learn about yourself, to know thyself. I think that there's a power in that. There's a power in knowing yourself and why you're drawn to certain archetypes. But again, I don't know what the evil monk says about me, but it's definitely something to explore. So anyway, if you have an idea, you can let me know below in the comments. So I love chatting with you guys. And I hope to come back soon for some more archetype things that I like. You know, I get inspired and I want to tell you guys about them. So let me know your thoughts. And I'll see you soon. Much love.